Hello everyone. Thank you for being here on this session. We will deal with something that you have already started, some of you have already started looking at, which is community psychology tools, toolkits and guidelines, how they can be applied to real case studies, and how examples from real life can inform back and give feedback to the guidance. So I'm going to talk just 15 minutes to introduce you to the topic. Then, as it is a discussion forum format, I hope you will discuss together. It will last 20 minutes, but after 10 minutes I will ask you to switch group, and then we will have a feedback, and we will discuss all together. So first of all, what is the topic about? Transition towns is the grassroots social movement I am referring to. I don't know if you are familiar with it, if you know it, if you're activists or whatever. Has anyone heard of transition towns? Yeah? Do you want? No? Yeah, okay, I will explain of course. Well, it is cultural movement or a quiet revolution aiming at transforming the actual economical paradigm, which is based on unlimited and low-cost fossil fuels and the exploitation of natural resources, to a new economic model which is based on local production and resilience. Resilience in the wider sense of the term, it is human resilience, economical resilience, environmental resilience. The aim is to think global, but we cannot just think or talk about it. The aim is to act, so there is a great emphasis on the power of just doing stuff. So people are actually encouraged to put their ideas into practice. Okay. Another important point is the fact that transition is a network. So there is a lot available online, a lot of resources online, and the idea of network is also the idea of being connected. The aim of the movement is not to create a happy island, which is isolated from everyone else, but to be still interconnected with others. But at the same time, interconnectedness is not dependence. So that is the shift we have. Another point is that transition town movement embeds permaculture principles. I won't deal with permaculture here, but basically what is taken from permaculture are the core values that, as you can see, are also community psychology values. Because the main ethical values are care for earth, care for people, and fair share. So they totally overlap, they totally share the community psychology vision. Care for earth is related, of course, to life abundance. We talked about it yesterday. Biological exuberance, trying not to have a scarcity of resources. Care for people goes from interpersonal relations to community relationships and to the wider institutional level. Fair share, of course, is more connected to the economical vision. Not to exploit the resources and to share the surplus with others. Rob Hopkins is the co-founder of Transition Towns movement. The first transition town ever is in Totnes, Devon, and as you can see from here, the movement is quite spread around the UK. So I think that someone has been involved or heard of it in some ways. And at a glance, this is how the movement is spread around the world. So as you can see, there is a lot going on in Europe. I'd say Western Europe mainly, because countries like Hungary, Poland, Bulgaria are not that involved into that. Western Europe, US, and part of Australia. Australia because it's the country where permaculture was basically born. And I'd say that the US and Western Europe are that involved because of the financial crisis, the awareness we have about scarcity of resources and environmental issues. How does transition work in practice? Well, usually there is a transition talk in a small town, in a neighborhood, and transition principles and methodologies are introduced to people in a very informal way, and this usually galvanizes people attending the session, and people start putting together ideas, discuss them, and translating them into practice. And usually the practices that arise are food growing groups. So they set up community gardens, they grow their own vegetables and fruit in allotments, or community-owned bakeries and breweries. So bread is something that usually, bread and whatever has to do with bakery is very common, very popular, so this is always a very good way to start. There are transition street projects that happens mainly in bigger towns. So what people do, they focus on a street because maybe people don't know who they're living next to. And so it is a street-by-street based project, again, to share time, to share resources, to get to know people face to face. Building community relationships, again, usually people meet up at a very individual level or in organizations, but there is a lack of the intermediate level, which is community level. And so a great emphasis is on building community relationships, letting people work together and monitor how people work together. Examples of community-owned energy. We had an example yesterday from Zoli Community Hydro. There is here the speaker from yesterday. So what they did basically is they set up a hydro pump from the local river to give energy to the community. There are re-economy projects which are much wider. You can find a lot on the internet. But basically, they are a tool to set up businesses, new businesses, local businesses, to give new jobs at a local level. So they're very, very important given the current economical situation. A lot of people are unemployed, lose their jobs. So they're really actual and important. And of course, there are many other projects that just come from people idea. This is the ethos and the way that transition actually works. So what I did for my PhD, I studied a transition town in Italy, the very first transition town in Italy, which is in this region. So we are center north Italy. And this is how the region is divided into provinces. And Monteveglio is a small town near Bologna, so we are around here. It was the first transition town in Italy, and it started in 2009. It's a very small town, around 5,000 inhabitants, so it's an average size to engage community. Because what happens in bigger towns is that the town is divided into smaller neighborhoods, of course. So my role, I was a PhD student from another town, University of Macerata, and I interacted with the community for almost 3 years. I didn't stay all the time there. I used to go and be back from my university town to Montevideo. I interacted a lot with the community. I did semi-structured interviews, participant observations, document analysis. So how did I use community psychology? Well, I was not involved as a community psychologist there working, but I used community psychology as an approach to read the material I had, to boost my reflexivity on the project and on my data. So I joined the community psychology perspective campus. What happened there? It happened that from the transition town committee, some people, around 5 to 10 people, willing to act locally and not just talking about the global scenario of peak oil and climate change. They said, okay, good to talk, but now let's do something. And as you can see, from maybe 100 people attending the talk, 5 or 10 decided actually to put that in practice. And they decided to start from the relocalization of food production, but at the same time, they wanted to give great emphasis to inclusion and personal growth, which is termed inner transition. This is just in transition terms, but it's about getting to know yourself and connecting to others. They built an association called Strecacon, which is a particular vegetable that when you get it from the ground, it just sticks like this. So it's like pogno in Italian is like hand closing. So this is how the vegetable acts, and this is the name. And they also did a community agricultural cooperative. Okay, so they set up a cooperative. They started undertaking permaculture and transition trainings. They followed regenerative organic agriculture trainings. So they were very focused on the topic. They said, well, we want to grow up food, vegetables, we need to get to know how it works. At the same time, we want to emphasize our own personal growth. So they used to follow family and systemic constellations. I don't know if you're familiar again with this tool. You can find a lot about it. Anyway, it's a tool which was developed by psychologist Bert Hellinger. And some of them actually undertook individual psychotherapy. Not all of them, some, like 3-4 people, and not regular. So what you can see here at a glance is that they focus on the topic, how to do things. They focus on their individual growth, but there is not that much at the community level. How did they train to work together at the community level? So I just give you this hint. Of course, they had tools to do a lot. They did a lot for the local community. They created a great supply chain of vegetables and ancient grains. They processed locally the raw materials, so the ancient grain was processed in a local mill, and they could store the grain locally and then sell it to local bakeries and markets. They included a lot of marginalized people. They started with one disabled person who was paid by social services to stay all day at the pub. Why is that? Because the only people who could take care of him were retired people who spent their time at the pub, and so they paid those people to keep him at the pub. Of course, setting up the cooperative, they could say, look, we have place, you can come here, you can learn how to grow vegetables, you can stay among peers, and so they also got funds for this, to work with him. Prisoners. In Bologna there is a big prison. Not all the prisoners have to stay in all the time. So some of them had a daily allowance to go outside. And they were involved in the project. Migrants. There was a Tunisian baker, who used to be a baker in Tunisia. Well, we may need a baker here, but he couldn't find a job at the beginning, so how can we involve him with the community? He started doing workshops in elementary schools, teaching children how to do bread, pasta, and after that, he could find a job locally. So, as you can see, I'm not going through all this. There is an example, of course, for each one of on the list. But this is to tell you that actually there was a lot of going on. There was not an issue about getting funded, getting project funded, or how to do things. They were very capable to do things, but they reached all these outcomes. This is in Italian, but it's just to give you an idea that the association Strecapon was very linked, interconnected, had a solid network in the local and in the local political asset. So it involved also the University of Bologna, the prison, the Bologna Council, other associations. So this is just to give you at a glance that they were not isolated. They used to work with other people. What happened? Nonetheless, they did all this. Nonetheless, they were called everywhere to give speeches, to train other people, to galvanize other audiences. What happened is that among those 5 or 10 people, between 5 and 10, there were a lot of tensions, and these hidden dynamics couldn't be expressed in the meeting. They used to have periodical meetings during which, of course, they were encouraged to talk genuinely, to be open about their feelings. These meetings were not run or facilitated by any community psychologist, I have to say. So there were meetings where people come together, they met to talk to each other in a genuine way, but probably people kept for themselves a lot of resentment that exploded in many ways. Very simple way, people didn't talk to each other for days. So sometimes I came back for a short period and I was asking, well, have you talked to him, to her, what does she says? I don't know. You know, we argued a week ago and I haven't talked to her so far. Other problem, most of the people were no more proactive. So when there was a task or a goal, people didn't offer to do things. They were waiting for instructions. They were willing to have a hierarchy. That is what was distracted before. But they were like, well, you know, he knows how to do it. Let's wait for him or her to tell us. So of course, project took much longer to be done. And it was more and more difficult to have a trade-off between achieving a goal and engaging the steering committee and waiting for all people to be at the same level. So, what should we do? Should we go ahead, do not care if he or she is willing to do this project because we have this goal, we are funded for this project, and we have to give an outcome. Or no, let's postpone the goal, but let's wait for everybody to come up with an idea, to be creative, to put an effort in the project. The trade-off became really, really difficult. So more and more people in the steering committee starting to perceive the burden of the situation, and some of them gave up or just became very passive. And actually one of the people who was considered the leader had a burnt out and just dismissed all his roles and went out of the committee. So, but I don't want this to be a sad story. There is a lot to do. I'm happy also to go back to the community and talk to them again. But I need also your feedback, your help, and we can also share a lot. Maybe you will be in the future involved in projects like this as community psychologists, as activists, as psychologists from other branches, as professionals from other disciplines. So what I would like you to do is, considering the guidelines that that were on the Community Psychology UK link. So if you have a digital device, you can already open the link. Is it wrong?
No, it's right. I'm just thinking about how they'd be applied in this case. Yeah, that's good.
Okay. Oh well, we can discuss it. So I have copies of the guidelines. I just have 10, but you can discuss it in small groups, hopefully, or we might have more from the previous workshop. So what I would like you to do is to go through the guidelines, discuss it for 10 minutes with the group and then switch group. And well, I suggested a few points to focus on because to me they're very related to the case study I showed. But of course, I'm happy to hear any kind of feedback and think about how community psychologists could prevent such a state of affairs, or even if you are from another background, how would you deal with this state of affairs? What kind of practices from other backgrounds you can bring into this case, and imagining to go back and empower people from this steering committee. So I leave it to you. If you are happy to do that, you can form small groups. I have the copies of the guidelines. I will tell you when 10 minutes are passed and you can switch groups. Okay, some more here.
How did you get on with which one is already lost the ID? No, it's to answer the question. And I think because I'm not a bit stuck, and she's actually pulled out a blind plate for us. Exactly, he can't have this, they should have it. On this page, for example, number 4, she's saying there's a specific skill to using individual communities around psychologists will work as a development skill. That's what I think it's about thinking about how do we use psychological skills to provide these tensions into
set yourself up in a sense as some sort of expert or some sort of attitude to why should anybody pay any attention?
Of course they do, have that same waiting for instructions. So that you don't, you've got a combination of if you've accepted the certificates and then everybody else wants it. And that's what I'm trying to so, I mean, I think of the ones that work in G-Labs or accepted
If you have what you might call a client group, then you automatically put into the transition group. Everybody's there in their own right. Everybody will, lots of people will have ideas. There's beautiful people that join a transition group that pioneers in the sense of being open to new ideas. And the things about transition have been quite involved with highly self-selected group. I mean, you've got 10 people, and you want to involve all sorts of people, and the sort of activities that they often recommend in movement. You know, all the people who run wild, the people in the involved in I think they really do not want to be involved in the sort of not the content. I mean, obviously, they're really exposed to all the topics, but it's just the really style. Having nice you're right. For the first time, my wife ran a mile. Even she was asking, she was sitting in the room and asked to introduce herself. And say,
The camera is facing that way, but on here, I can see this empty space.
Not everybody wants to. So you get people to raise She did it because she was working with, I forget which women farmers somewhere, and she thought they had that money. What I did was we had to find a different way. And I think this is trained psychologist. You don't have to then have to
Things like games, it's very alien to come into a situation. And I mean, if we're trying to involve a very wide range of people, well, I'm thinking about the transition. I mean, if it was, say, refugees, that might be a very different thing. Certainly in my community.
So different. Humans.
Oh yeah.
We did a section where we got people position themselves in the room in relation to the issues, we use that then to draw out discussion. People don't have to participate, they sound like my children. Again, I met people in London, they seem to be much more up for that.
Yes.
I think you just got to sense the particular group.
Yes, but people have got themselves, and that's fine. But how do you reach out to people who haven't got themselves?
So I can ask you about systemic career, because that's my limited range of tools. That's what I'm thinking about, which is how to bring some of those social skills that keep you building distances out of that person that has particular cash. You know, how can we talk about it in a way that doesn't feel blaming and think arguments, but just seems more, I think in a particular situation, just really different. Just being in a meeting with a psychiatrist, and then this guy was there, his supporters with him, and they got really angry with the psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist got really irritated with them, and this guy came asking for less of it. And it was quite useful to be out of that and sort of say that the is that the home office, you guys can join forces together and not be split against each other. So is there a way that you can use sort of ability to stand back, maybe to sort of try and build joining rather than splitting? Yeah. Again, that's not for everyone. So it's yeah.
And that was after an experience a bit like you described, where we lost, a couple of family members. Really, it was very difficult. We had luckily, some people and the rest of us got on with it. We did very guarded about Oh, it was me as a colleague who had a background in public health promotion.
So 2 minutes for
I worked for many years, so we were sort of aware. We talked about the chief you're not promoted.
She's not mentioned it now.
No,
That's what you want to do.
it is, although she tends to be
So was there a particular person that called us?
no, that's really important because then when we go work we're having those sorts of issues. So it's somebody's taking that way of
So starting from whoever wants. Okay, I decided from this. We have 5 minutes.
So what I was being very cynical about it, saying that I thought that the work more technology like interactive, that we need to have like a Facebook page or some sort of technological way of interacting that kind of stuff with the result. You like the idea of working in the local bakery, hanging out with his neighbours would probably, I think, would make him feel pretty uneasy. Whereas getting on the computer and working that way would be much more his way of interacting with the communities these days. So I think personally I would say that we would need to find some way of extending it beyond that very localised, very village-based way of interacting, which to me sounds like almost like a step backwards into a more traditional way of life, which is a nice idea, but I can't personally picture that anytime soon in that one. So yeah, that's me one of them.
Yes, Michelle, is it okay if I switch your Wi-Fi off then? This is the key for the lift.
Yes, from the room. I was